neighborhoods. I mean, crime is up, people are noticing, which means it's going to get political and fast. And Republicans are planning to make a big issue of crime this fall in the elections. Newt Gingrich just pointed out on Fox how well it worked for Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, running on a tough on crime. And they see it as a template for November, which is pretty friggin' ironic and also something that Democrats need to sit up and take notice of. So where is this crime wave coming from right now? Well, part of it, no doubt, is associated with people being out of work and out of school because of the pandemic and may well resolve itself as people get back to work and back to school. Part of it is probably associated with how the pandemic exacerbated the homelessness crisis. And numerous studies over the years have shown a clear connection between increases in crime following increases in economic inequality, which has gone up in America dramatically. But it would be impossible to discuss how pervasive crime is in America without discussing the fact that we had a criminal in the White House for 4 years. I mean, seriously, after 4 years of America having a professional, lifelong criminal as our president, is it any wonder that crime is up? Criminality, just like morality, flows from the top down. Remember Enron? You had a professional criminal, Ken Lay, who started the company in 1985 out of Texas, of course, an energy company. Gee, what a surprise. During Reagan's greed is good heyday. He not only corrupted hundreds of his own employees, dozens of whom went to prison, but he also corrupted Arthur Andersen, the accounting firm, one of the 5 biggest accounting firms in America, which no longer exists because they went along with Ken Lay's, criminal operations. Louise and I have, in the last year or so, watched Billions, Yellowstone, and Succession. These are 3 shows that, where the head of the family or the head of the company is basically this ruthless rule breaker, which is kind of our new bad guy we all love in America now, which I, am very ambivalent about. But, this is these are examples. These three shows that you can binge watch are examples of how criminality at the top or immorality at the top flows down. And we see this around the world. I mean, Duterte in the Philippines, he was a mayor for 22 years of a city that had the highest murder rate and the second highest rape rate in all of the Philippines. He becomes president, and suddenly, now you've got the International Criminal Court going after him for thousands of politically inspired murders. These all are examples of how the culture of criminality flows, whether it's corporate or political, flows from the top down. When a criminal's in charge, he sets the tone and becomes the role model for the company or the country, just like parents set the moral tone for a family. Put a criminal in charge and you get more crime. It's really that simple. And look at Trump. I mean, this is why it's so ironic that Newt Gingrich is saying, the Republicans are going to run on a tough on crime platform. Really? We had a rapist, a tax cheat, an embezzler, a fraudster, a mob associate, and a guy who's openly criminal as president for 4 years. Is it any wonder that America's criminal class feel emboldened? Or that young people who came of age during his presidency are choosing crime as a way to make a quick buck? I mean, they watched as Trump tried his best to make it easier for other criminals of his ilk, gutting the Internal Revenue Service, promoting hundreds of unqualified hacks to the federal courts. He even got away with committing 10 prosecutable instances of blatant obstruction of justice that the Mueller report found. Completely got away with it. Right? Nobody's even talking about prosecuting him for those things. His Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, was called a professional grifter by Forbes magazine. His Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, was known as the foreclosure king because he allegedly hired people to illegally robo-sign thousands of fraudulent documents and used them to make millions of dollars by evicting over 30,000 California residents from their homes. Trump's kids were convicted of running a fraudulent charity and are allegedly tied into hundreds of millions of dollars worth of never prosecuted tax and bank fraud schemes. His fixer and lawyer, Michael Cohen, went to federal prison for a campaign finance scheme that Trump not only oversaw but signed the checks for. But Trump seems to still have gotten away with it. 5 of his cabinet secretaries were convicted of running a fraudulent charity and are allegedly tied into hundreds of millions of dollars worth of never prosecuted tax and bank fraud schemes. It's just incredible. Trump tried to overthrow the government of the United States right out in the open, and over 1,000 Republican officials who had taken an oath to defend the Constitution and their nation went along with this criminal scheme. I mean, given all this, is it any surprise, and so far he's got away with all of this, is it any surprise that criminals are saying, hey, good time to be an American? So now we've got this law and order dog whistle that the Republicans are going to pull out. Richard Nixon started this in 68 and 72. Richard Nixon, the guy who was, who committed treason by cutting a deal with the South Vietnamese so that they wouldn't end the war, so that Nixon could beat Hubert Humphrey in 1968. Nixon, who took a $500,000 bribe from the milk lobby and $1 million bribe from Jimmy Hoffa. Nixon, who hired burglars to break into the DNC. He ran on Law and Order. George H.W. Bush set up a cocaine sting across the street from the White House so he could wave this white powder around on national TV. He got a great campaign commercial out of it. Keith Jackson, a local high school student, was the kid who got busted. He got a 10-year prison sentence. When the judge sentenced Jackson, he said, I don't want to sentence you to 10 years, but it's a mandatory minimum for crack cocaine, thanks to the Bush administration. And he said, quote, of George W. Bush, this is the judge at the sentencing of this teenager. He said, quote, he used you in the sense of making a big drug speech, end quote. But, crime is powerful stuff. Being the victim of crime is to experience trauma. It's real. Abraham Maslow, with his hierarchy of human needs, pointed out that safety is right at the bottom. If your safety is threatened, everything above that, what your intellect, emotion, love, family, everything just goes away for a moment. Getting Medicare for all passed would be great, but if somebody's got a gun in your face or they're driving down the street with your car that they just hijacked, you're not thinking about it. Crime is visceral. Nothing else hits us at that level, at the bottom of Maslow's pyramids. And that's why Democrats have to put forth bold initiatives to solve this problem and prepare for this coming political onslaught. And I'm telling you, it's coming. Defund the police has been used against Democrats with success in numerous races now. There were at least a half a dozen Democratic members of Congress who did not get reelected in the last election cycle in 2020, and specifically because their opponents ran defund the police ads against them. Democrats need to come up with basically a rebuttal to that, or their own response. You reform the police, community policing, find examples. The Republicans back in the 90s all across the country were running on Rudy Giuliani's successes in New York with his no broken windows and his stop and frisk policies. They were basically racism on steroids, but it was a good line. Well, let's find something that's real. Let's find actual success stories that Democratic mayors or Democratic cities or towns or even states have done and start pushing those out, start highlighting them. Because if we don't, it's going to be a tough time. It's going to be a real tough time. And not only that, then on top of all that, you've got white-collar crime. White-collar crime is costing Americans more than street crime, and it's costing Americans more lives. More Americans have died because of white-collar crime, and more Americans have lost everything financially because of white-collar crime than all the robberies and burglaries and murders and carjackings in the last 30 years. It's just, the math on it is just absolutely breathtaking. So we have to reframe what policing means, and we need to get ahead of this. We need to reframe the definition of crime to start including white-collar crime. Those are just two examples. There's a bunch of others. But and in reality, Democrats are not anti-cop. New York City just elected a Democrat who was the former police chief, I believe, Eric Adams, as their mayor. Val Demings down in Florida may well run against Marco Rubio. She's a former cop. Democrats are not anti-cop, and they need to get ahead of this issue, this perception of crime and the policy issues around crime before it buries them. So